Alex Eala had just stepped off the practice court, and within seconds, she was trapped. Fans pressed in from every direction. The crowd kept surging forward. The people in the back couldn't see what was happening in the front, so they kept pushing. And with every shove, Alex felt herself getting pinned closer and closer to a wall. Her father was there. Her coach was there. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because there was no security between her and hundreds of fans desperate to get closer. And that's when a 20-year-old rising tennis star had to shout the only thing she could think of. "Give me some space, or I'm going to get run over." Let that sink in. One of the fastest rising names in women's tennis had to beg for room just to safely leave a practice session at the Australian Open. And the craziest part? Nobody had prepared for it. Because Alex Eala is no longer just another player on tour. She's become something much bigger than that. What she revealed later on a podcast didn't just expose one frightening moment in Melbourne. It revealed a much deeper problem. Because Alex Eala's popularity has exploded so quickly that the system around her hasn't caught up. She arrived at the 2026 Australian Open carrying more than a racket bag. She carried the pride of an entire nation. Everywhere she goes, Filipino flags show up in the stands. Not just in one city, not just at one tournament. From Melbourne to Dubai to New York, her fan base follows her like a wave. And that kind of support changes everything. The problem is, the tennis world still hadn't fully adjusted. At the time, Alex's ranking didn't place her in that automatic category where players receive heightened protection, larger entourages, and more structured security around every movement. On paper, she was still just another player climbing the rankings. But in reality, the crowds were treating her like a superstar. And that disconnect became impossible to ignore in Melbourne. The setting looked normal enough. An outdoor practice court, bleachers on both sides, a ramp leading up from court level, a simple exit, no barriers, no security staff stationed nearby, no buffer between Alex Eala and the public. She finished practicing, packed her things, and headed toward the exit. What met her wasn't a line of fans. It was a wave. People surged forward for autographs, photos, gifts, and a chance to get close to the moment. The fans at the front could see her clearly. The ones behind them couldn't. So they pushed, and pushed, and pushed. Alex later described the scene in chillingly simple terms. She said the crowd was pressing her toward the wall, and she could feel how dangerous it was becoming. That's the detail that changes this from a feel-good story about popularity into something much more serious. Because this wasn't excitement anymore. This was a safety risk. And no one had planned for it. What makes this even bigger is that Melbourne wasn't some random one-off incident. It was part of a growing pattern. Alex herself said she realized things had changed when people started waiting for her practices. Not her matches. Her practices. That's when she knew her life on tour was becoming something different. And if you really think about that, it says everything. Most players ranked in the 40s do not walk onto a practice court and find crowds already waiting. Most of them practice, cool down, leave quietly, and move on with their day. That's the normal experience. Alex Eala's experience is the exact opposite of normal. People aren't just showing up when she's scheduled on center court. They're showing up before she even starts warming up. They're waiting for practice sessions. They're gathering at training courts. They're creating an atmosphere around her that most players at her ranking simply do not generate. That's the whole story. Her ranking may still say one thing, but her cultural impact says something completely different. And the places where this happens make that even clearer. Alex pointed to cities like New York, Melbourne, and Dubai as places where the reaction around her becomes especially intense. In Dubai and across the Middle East, there are massive Filipino communities. The same is true in cities all over the world. Whenever the WTA schedule overlaps with a strong Filipino population, Alex Eala doesn't just enter a tournament. She becomes an event inside the event. And that kind of draw doesn't happen by accident. It comes from identity. It comes from representation. It comes from millions of people seeing someone who looks like them, carries their flag, and belongs on one of the biggest stages in the sport. That kind of connection is powerful, and you could hear just how powerful it had become from the people around the tour. Jessica Pegula, a top 5 player in the world, talked about what it was like in Dubai. She said the noise around Alex's match was so loud that her coach heard it from the hotel and asked what was going on.
Think about that.
Not from inside the stadium.
From the hotel.
That is not normal crowd noise for a mid-ranked player. That is star-level gravity. And yet, through all of this, Alex's instinct hasn't been to create distance from her fans. It's been the exact opposite. At the 2026 Miami Open, videos went viral showing her moving past security so she could get closer to fans for photos and autographs. She didn't lean away from the moment. She stepped into it. And that tells you something important about who she is. This isn't a player carefully manufacturing a public image. This is a player who genuinely understands what she means to the people supporting her. She knows that many of those fans aren't just casual spectators. They've traveled long distances. They've waited for hours. They've brought flags, gifts, and hope with them. For a lot of them, seeing Alex Eala isn't just about tennis. It's personal. It's emotional. It's cultural. And maybe that's why her bond with fans feels so real. But even real connection needs structure. It needs boundaries. It needs protection. Because if one crowd surge can pin a player to a wall, then admiration alone is no longer enough to manage the moment. That reality became even more obvious when Alex shared the story on the Players Box podcast. The reaction from the other players was immediate. One of them basically told her what everyone listening was already thinking: you need to ask for security. And once Alex finally did, the difference was immediate. She requested security for her next session. She practiced on a main court, and suddenly things felt controlled again. Safer. More organized. More manageable. That one change proved something important. The chaos around Alex wasn't unavoidable. It was preventable. The system simply hadn't adjusted fast enough. And when fellow professionals on the tour are the ones telling you, "You're crazy big here," that conversation moves beyond hype. At that point, it becomes consensus. Players know what normal attention looks like. They also know when something has clearly moved beyond normal. That's where Alex Eala is now. And this is why the conversation matters so much going forward. Because Melbourne is not where this ends. Her season keeps moving. New cities. New tournaments. New crowds. And every stop now raises the same question. Is the infrastructure ready for the demand she creates? That's a serious question for the WTA and for tournament organizers. Because for years, the sport has talked about reaching new markets, growing the game globally, and building stronger fan connection. Alex Eala is already doing that. Organically. Not through marketing campaigns. Not through corporate slogans. Not through manufacturer hype. She's doing it because people show up for her. They fill seats. They wave flags. They create noise. They change the atmosphere wherever she plays. That kind of pull is rare. And maybe the most remarkable part is that it exists regardless of the result on the scoreboard. At the 2026 Australian Open, Alex lost in the first round. For many players, that would mean a quiet exit. But not for her. She walked off the court after a loss, and the fans were still there. The flags were still there. The energy was still there. The love did not disappear with the result. That tells you everything. This support is not conditional. It's not fragile. It's not built on one hot streak or one viral win. It's deeper than that. Alex even admitted that part of her initially resisted the idea of needing security. She didn't want to feel like she was acting bigger than she was. She didn't want it to seem like fame was getting to her head. And honestly, that makes her even more relatable. Because she wasn't asking for special treatment. She was trying to stay grounded. But safety doesn't care about humility. And Melbourne made that impossible to ignore. That wall made the decision for her. Since then, the momentum around her has only continued. She responded the way elite athletes respond. She kept playing. She kept winning. She went to Indian Wells and beat Coco Gauff. She went to Miami and made another strong run before falling in the round of 16. But even as the results improved, the bigger story kept following her. Not just what she was doing in matches. What happened when she walked to practice the next morning? What happened when the crowd gathered? What happened when the noise started building before the first ball was even struck? That is the new reality around Alex Eala, a player ranked outside the top 5, but drawing attention like someone already living in that tier. A player whose influence can't be measured by ranking alone. Because this is no longer just about tennis. It's about what happens when athletic success collides with national pride. It's about what happens when representation becomes visible on a global stage. It's about what happens when one player starts carrying the emotional weight of millions of people who see themselves in her rise. And that kind of force changes the sport around it. Alex Eala doesn't just compete in front of fans. She carries an entire nation onto the court with her. And now tennis has to adapt. It has to rethink how it handles player access, practice security, crowd control, and the reality that a player's impact can outgrow her ranking much faster than the system expects. Because the old model clearly doesn't fit anymore. Not when a practice session becomes a crowd event. Not when hotel windows shake from the noise around a match. Not when fellow players openly acknowledge that the spotlight around you has become too big to ignore. So maybe the real question now is this. Is Alex Eala redefining what a WTA superstar looks like? Because maybe superstardom in modern tennis isn't just about ranking points and trophy counts. Maybe it's also about connection. Maybe it's about cultural reach. Maybe it's about inspiring a level of devotion that turns every tournament stop into a home crowd, no matter what country you're in. And if that's true, then Alex Eala isn't just rising through the sport. She's changing the way the sport defines greatness. And if the tennis world is only now waking up to that, then one thing is already clear. The fans saw it first.